Sokka is a bit of a mystery in the Avatar story following the war. All of the other characters get a comic of their own, or at least we know what happened to them. I mean, even Suki's got a comic of her own now. But Sokka, nothing. Except he does have a story running in the background about the tension between tradition and technology, about confronting the socioeconomic realities of this world from the perspective of a non-bender. Also, if I look like I've been crying, it's just because I've been listening to sad music and I just cry way too easily these days. It's just how it works for some reason. But first, give me an all hail Supreme Leader Momo down in the comments, and cheers to Campfire Explore for sponsoring this video. I say, how about you, me, my link down the description, a bottle of wine, a late night, who knows where it could lead. Sokka's arc in The Last Airbender is a very traditional coming-of-age story in many ways. It's about him learning self-control, responsibility, leadership, and the place of self-sacrifice. It's about him becoming a man of his tribe, and there's this Dunning-Kruger curve to how he thinks of himself. He starts out being overly confident, thinking he's the best damn warrior in the entire world, that he's a great strategist, despite being neither of those things really. Then he grows, and he learns across the story. But as he does, he actually doubts himself even more, till he feels like he can't do anything, that he doesn't contribute, which is how we end up at Sokka's Master, one of my favorite episodes, by the way. What's your favorite episode, you know? Tell me down below. It's only after learning a lot by the Day of Black Sun that he both recognizes his skills and the gaps in his knowledge, coming to terms with himself and becoming wise, I guess. A large part of this arc comes from Sokka being the only non-bender in Team Avatar. Hashtag justice for Suki? I don't know, does she count?
You know, it was really unclear.
Now, though the creators did initially say that they didn't want the world stratified into a class of benders and non-benders, well, it kinda is anyway. The Fire Nation noble houses all come from the strongest lines of firebenders, to the point that the Fire Lord tries to keep the genes within the family. Even if the Earth King isn't an earthbender, the state power really lies with the Dai Li, a sect of exclusively powerful earthbenders. All of the major players in Avatar's history were basically benders. The cogs of wealth, class, and power are clearly turned by them and work better for them. It's a lot harder to make a living building houses when you're competing with people who can conjure the foundations from the earth. It's really an unavoidable reality of this kind of world. But Sokka finds himself in a post-war world where things are starting to change. The technology of the Fire Nation's industrial revolution, machinery, steam power, mass transport, doesn't just make life easier for a lot of people, but it acts as an equalizer between benders and non-benders. Katara, this is hard for you to understand, one non-bender says, because you're a bender. The kind of power you possess just hasn't been available to us non-benders. Until now, machines can finally make us equal. Sokka was always an inventor and tinkerer. He knows the value of technology, so his story naturally picks up with him trying to bring more of these machines to the world, to improve the lives of other non-benders, because he gets it. In the Rift, Sokka encounters a forklift for the first time and he's just over the moon about it. He loves the damn thing. Oh, there's a whole factory dedicated to producing and manipulating materials in a way that previously only benders were ever capable of doing. It's like literally finding out you have magic as well. So it really picks up from his arc in the show of him finding how he can make a difference in a world full of benders, and machines help him and others do that. Likewise, in North and South, the Southern Water Tribe is rapidly expanding and changing with the Southern Reconstruction Project. Having found an oil deposit, Sokka views this and the machinery that might come with it as an opportunity to bring his home into a new era, into the modern world. A world with so much more opportunity because suddenly they're able to build things quickly and safely in a way that benders perhaps aren't even able to. They can use materials like wood and metal that most benders can't manipulate. Now, while not a perfect parallel because bending does not equal wealth, the Industrial Revolution in our world massively expanded the middle class, largely due to these machines. Prior to that, you couldn't really produce more than what you could refine or sew or mine personally until machines came along. With the ability to make more money came more free time, the capacity to engage in politics and demand new rights. Sokka is pretty keen for that same thing to happen, and as someone with a lot of political power in the post-war world, he clearly sets himself on a path to facilitating that. But in contrast, Katara views all of this technological advancement changing her home as kind of horrific, that it's corrupting her home, polluting the environment, destroying her culture, with the traditional ways of doing things, building and cooking, being left behind for what? I've made a video discussing Katara's perspective before, it's linked up in the corner right now, but all of this does open an interesting discussion about power, tradition, and progress, the lenses through which we view each of these things. Katara doesn't just benefit from the culture and political economic framework as it stands without machines, it's something that she personally identifies with as well. It's deeply tied to her sense of self-worth. Waterbending arts are deeply ingrained into the way that Water Tribe society works. They form the values and give Katara a sense of place and purpose in her society. Culture is sometimes imagined as something that we might engage with, but is not us. Sokka is very much someone who is aware of how important the waterbending arts to his people and culture and home, but he is not a waterbender. His identity is not wrapped up in it in the way that Katara's is. In a weird way, Sokka is kind of an outside observer to his own culture. And that's okay, by the way. There are lots of things that we consider to be part of our culture, but are not us. For a simple example, some people may consider a church or certain religious practices to be part of their culture, even if they are not religious themselves. But on the other hand, some religious people who view their religion as a foundational part of their culture, be it Christian, Muslim, Jewish, Buddhist, or otherwise, they may view attempts to reduce its importance in public life or in government, intentionally or not only as unwanted change, but as undermining their sense of self-worth and their connection to what they view as their culture. It becomes easy to see it as a personal attack, even if it's not. Especially because we're forgetting here that Sokka is trying to include people in his culture who were not necessarily excluded before, but were disadvantaged. He's trying to increase their self-worth within their idea of their culture. Katara and Sokka, of course, clash over this for a long time, until Sokka finally says, "But Katara, you and I have no actual idea what things were like here before the war. This South Pole that you're imagining, the one where everything is how it's supposed to be, what if that never actually existed?" And I mean, we tend to mythologize the past, our cultural heritage, our national identity, don't we? We tell it as a story to our kids, to others, to ourselves. And often it's a little bit too perfect, ignoring the imperfections of history. But that story is especially easy to believe if you fit into it. Sokka's story is about reconciling his deep attachment to his cultural heritage, which we see in the show that kept him so close to his father in his absence, with the fact that his culture may disadvantage people if he holds on to it. There's an interesting historical parallel we could make to the Meiji Restoration, which was a radical socio-economic shift in Japan that started in 1868, largely in response to the growing presence of Western powers in Asia. There was the sense that it was either change or die, because if we don't, we're probably going to get colonized. And you know what? Probably true. So things did begin to change. But at the time, 1 out of every 20 people in Japan were samurai. Now, there's a bit of a misconception that samurai were these warrior poets who followed this Bushido philosophy that was very clear and specific, but they were really more of a military class that ranged from poor to administrative people to the very wealthy landowners. Either way, many of them resisted this rapid globalization and cultural evolution on similar grounds to Katara. The samurai occupied a particular position in society that meant that they didn't want to leave this part of their culture behind. It was a reduction in their position, yes, even if it meant bringing others up, but they framed it as something detrimental to the fabric of their culture and society. As to adopting the system of every other country to improve our own way of life, it is first necessary to base our country on a firm foundation, develop public morals. If, on the other hand, we blindly follow the foreign, our national policy will decline and our public morals decay beyond rescue. But even when confronted with the reality of living as a non-bender, Katara turns around and says, "I guess I've just never thought of non-benders as not equal." I mean, it's kind of like the samurai during this radical change in society, turning around and going, I never thought of the farmers as unequal. We just have different roles, different strengths, different places in society. I suspect the samurai had a similar sort of blindness, the kind that we all have when it comes to our own culture, especially the parts that we fit into. There's a really interesting moment in the first season of Legend of Korra where a non-bender yells out to Korra saying,
"Please help us! You're our avatar too!"
Korra's been trying to fit into the position of the avatar as someone who is neutral, in the middle, not biased. But sometimes being in the middle is taking the side of the oppressor, treating them as equal sides. And it's really easy to do that when you naturally align with the side with all of the power. Korra really has to reckon with what that means as the all-powerful bending avatar. What does it mean for her role here? So, what do you do about the samurai? Well, the powers of the Meiji Restoration did a couple of things. One, it tried to incorporate the samurai into the imperial army and administration, turning that military class into an empire-building force, with only moderate success. And two, it actually undermined their role and power in this new culture very explicitly with taxes and the like. Sokka most directly confronts this question in the comic Imbalance, where machines have started to put benders out of work. Their jobs have been automated, leading them to sabotage the factories and grow resentful of non-benders. Sokka helps Aang realize that even if they removed the bad guy in charge, it wouldn't fix the underlying socio-economic problems that were really causing this violence. The Bender supremacist movement is more than one person. Remember all the benders we saw? Some of them were even on the business council. While we don't know much about this period of his life, we do know that he would have been deeply aware of these problems, and he would have tried to use his influence to fix them. I can imagine him being something like a uniting figure. He's close to the bending population while able to speak to the problem from the position of a non-bender. There's some implication that he may have been responsible for starting the pro-bending arena games, which Marco and Berlin later describe as the one place benders and non-benders can gather in peace. And in the comic Imbalance, Sokka sees the importance of the non-bending arm to the police force, something that he would have likely carried over to Republic City. Finally, in helping found Republic City's council, it is implied again that Sokka tried to keep a mix of benders and non-benders working together, that giving everyone a voice in the way things work was helping keep it stable. The problem was that, of course, over time, these things break down, until they were all benders by the Legend of Korra. This again suggests to me that he was someone with enough influence to keep all of these budding factions together for a while, but not enough for that to last beyond him. Also, I need you to recognize how cute and lovely this baby is. She's been sleeping right next to my chair and I've nearly run her over multiple times, so instead I'm gonna hold her. So, when Aang goes to Sokka and he says, "Hey, all of these problems are being caused by machines, things would just be better if they just went back to the way they were," Sokka turns around and gives him a real reality check. He says, "There's a lot about the good old pre-machine days that doesn't seem that good to me," speaking as a non-bender. "You've seen how machines can make things between benders and non-benders a little more equal. Satoru can manage an entire factory by himself, which would have been impossible before. You can't blame the rise of bender supremacy on machines." And I mean, he's right, isn't he? So on the one hand, Sokka's story is about tradition versus progress and technology, but on the other, it's about navigating the tensions of a post-war world. What happens once the revolution is over? Once the war is won? Who gets to be in charge then? What things should we build our nation around? World War I was actually a time of intense class tensions across Europe, but war does something weird to those sentiments. Conscription and the direction of labour made for a more inclusive sense of national identity in 1914 Britain. Nationalism was one legacy of the war, Although war sensitized workers to class inequality, nationalist sentiments in popular culture set limits on the political consequences of class feeling. Whether it's true or not, war can obscure these tensions for a bit. The Chinese nationalists and communists, they united to fight the Japanese Empire in 1937, but fell back into civil war after the Second World War ended. The Mensheviks and Bolsheviks both kind of worked together in the 1917 Russian Revolution, but permanently fractured after the revolution succeeded, as they argued over how the new state should be arranged. It's easy when it's the enemy of my enemy is my friend, not so easy when it's the enemy is my enemy. In each of these, the socio-economic tensions are being put aside to fight the bigger enemy. But when that enemy's gone, those tensions come back, and often with a vengeance. Sokka explains that these tensions between benders and non-benders have been building for generations, but the 100-Year War probably helped people put them aside for a bit in order to fight the Fire Nation. And Sokka is finally seeing those tensions bubble to the surface, with rapidly advancing technology just exacerbating these issues. And Sokka, well, he's trying to figure out which side he wants to come down on. Part of the reason that this sort of thing is also so damn difficult is because of how we imagine and form our political communities. We typically form them around things we have in common with others, either a shared sense of something that we need to protect or preserve, or a shared thing that we want to accomplish. With the war over, benders and non-benders look for a new political community, one that isn't just stop the Fire Nation. And as those tensions bubble back to the surface, and they're starting to form around that belief that non-benders need to protect themselves from benders, and benders need to protect themselves from automation and non-benders. So, where does Sokka's arc go from here? While benders and non-benders do have things in common, these clearly aren't as strong as those fears. Now, Sokka hasn't grown up around those tensions, and he does have a vision for the future that brings them together, incorporates them both. It's a shared goal that might form a political community for a while, but he won't succeed. Abstract concepts like justice and peace and nation building, well, they're hard for the average person to internalize compared to, say, I've lost my job, who's to blame? Legend of Korra will see these tensions boil over, but it'll be interesting to see the ups and downs of trying to stop this and failing. Because history is a story of 10 failures for every success. Change is hard won in blood and sweat, and even then, it doesn't always last. So, I tried to take sponsors that I feel are going to be relevant to you and are things that I can comment on, and Campfire Explorer is that. It's something that I have really wanted to see for a while. It's a place designed not only to help you write and world build with timelines and character profiles and a manuscript editor, but it's going to help you earn money from your writing, because you can post it there and people can support writers they like directly, which is something that I can always get behind, democratizing writing. These guys have continuously tried to build the best platform they can for writers and world builders, and they listen to feedback. Like one time I just put out on Twitter, hey, wouldn't it be great if there was this feature somewhere? And they saw it. And then they added it in like 24 hours, which was just totally unexpected. On the more practical side, I love that you only pay for what you use, because it's super frustrating when you have to buy a massive thing, even though you only want to use one tiny little part of it. Here's looking at you, Adobe. So if you just want to use the character profiles, that's cool, and you can try it for free. And because I'm very selective about which sponsors I take, when I say you should go do that, I really do mean it. Because I know the Campfire has been really helpful to a lot of people in my audience, and hopefully I'll be able to read your stories on Explore soon. So send them to me when they're up there. And if you use my link, you get 20% off all lifetime purchases, and it helps the channel. Yeah, thank you. So click that down in the description. Go now. Go try it, cowards. Remember, On Writing and World Building Volume 2, you can pre-order now. It comes out
November 25th.
Stay nerdy, and I will see you in the future.